Okay, we're gonna go ahead on and get started. I want to thank those of you who have already joined us on today for joining us. My name is Janice Thomas. I'm the founder and CEO of a new organization called The Journey of Discovering You. And so I invited you all today to come. I want to bring some information to you all regarding the state of education. So the Journey of Discovering You, I was really ministered to by the student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. And so that's kind of like part of my theme of this particular event. And so our agenda is as follows. Of course, I'm going to do the introduction, and then I will do an overview of what the state of education is, the objective, and its why. We have Mr. Jamar Barnes with us today, who will share words from Good Reason Houston. And we're going to also share a very short video about Voices of Change. In between that time, we're going to do a Q&A if anyone has any questions. We have Mr. Ashton Mellett with us from Texas Metropolitan Organization, known as TMO. And he's gonna talk to us about some things. And then we also have Miss Amy Maddox, who will actually talk to us about House Bill 1842. We're gonna do another Q&A, and then we're gonna have our continuations. Then we're gonna have just discuss everything as a group. And then that will be like the end of our meeting. So here at Discovering You, our mission is to empower individuals, family, and communities by providing the necessary information and resources which will support the family structure, build leaders, as well as thriving communities, and promote inclusion, which will bridge relationships for community partners for various service and program offerings. In our vision, we will include all people who are willing to be leaders to ensure they are well-informed, aware of issues, and understand the importance of being actively involved in decision-making in societies. Leaders who will also teach, train, and empower others with the necessary information, knowledge, and skills to become leaders. So a little bit about Janice. Let me see. Janice is a daughter, she's a sister, and she's a mother and a grandmother. She's a graduate from Phyllis Wheatley High School. Her professional career path has been over 30 years in legal. She currently serves as the president of the Phyllis Wheatley Metropolitan Alumni Association. She is the owner, entrepreneur of several businesses, and founder of Discovering You. Janice is a parent leader and a parent organizer in education, and she's also a community leader. So what has us here today is the state of education. As you know, with the pandemic and everything, things have just changed, and this is not what we're used to. But at the same time, we still have to keep moving and be ready to be a part of change in our education system, actually, in the whole economy. So I just felt that it was very important to just share information with you all that I have since learned prior to the pandemic about the education system, as well as maybe some things that's going on now. So we have the what, right, in the state of education. The state of education, student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change, starting with me, starting with you. These conversations are parent-led community conversations regarding educational challenges and opportunities. The purpose of these discussions is in improving student outcomes, to bring an awareness of educational issues and concerns, to encourage community participation, involvement in our neighborhood schools, and to organize parents and communities to become leaders. And so what's very important to me is that I believe that all of us, parents especially, we have to be a voice and begin to speak up more about what we're wanting in education, what we believe is needed, and support the educational system as well. And that this is not like a one size, I mean, everyone should be involved. This is something that everyone is impacted by. And we just really hope that definitely something is said on today that would encourage you all to want to join us in this effort. And so what I did when I got involved myself, with the state of education, I said I would spend the next year working with parents to help them use their voice and power to improve education in Houston. We would have monthly meetings. We would focus on different topics. That's when I have several invites that'll go out about different topics that's going on in state of education. The goal is to connect parents with valuable resources. So as we have these conversations and I begin to establish relationship with different parents and organizational leaders, I'll be able to make those connections. I want to give parents the tools and information to communicate directly with decision makers. Now, parents are definitely the first decision maker, but when I'm also including like teachers, principals, staff, elected officials, school board members. So when we talk about decision making, we're looking at everyone collectively being involved and talking about what's the best interest for our children. And we want to make the community pay attention to all schools and all children, not just a few. So on today, our learning topic, the objective is for, and I have misplaced my screen right here. Can you all still see? Okay. For parents and communities to identify their role in support of the educational system and to foster healthy relationships with schools and education decision makers. And again, we know who they are, with parents taking the lead, right? And our next slide. Parents in education, why the parent voice? We believe that the parent voice is important because it would help decision makers need to listen to parents more. Why is it important for parents to be a voice in education? So these are some of the bullet points so that decision makers will listen to us more and so that parents can be a voice. And how can parents' voice change in education?
Oh, okay. Well, good evening or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jamar Barnes. I am the manager of family and community engagement here at Good Reason Houston. First of all, we just want to commend you, Janice, because you're doing a wonderful job. And I know we've been working closely alongside with you in planning with this. And so for those of you who are unaware, Good Reason Houston, we are a nonprofit here in Houston. We believe in the bold vision that every child in every single neighborhood across Houston, no matter what the district, whether it be public or charter, deserves to have access to world-class public schooling. And another thing is that we really want to make sure that parents are hyper engaged in bold decision making with their students, with the district, and in partnership. Across districts. We also believe that we want to make sure that we get parents together to help them organize and advocate for their children. We want to create a community of parents who are being leaders and organizers. A lot of the times that parent voice sometimes gets pushed down, but we want to make sure we elevate that. And we also want to make sure that we are helping to create a coalition of partnerships that joins parents and students in neighborhoods, communities, principals, ISDs, charter networks. And so that's kind of the basis of our work and what we stand on and why we support Janice in her bold and courageous vision with where she is with the state of education right now. I'm also going to drop into the chat our goodreasonhouston.org website so that if anyone wants to visit and connect with us or learn more about what we do. But we just wanted to briefly just let you know that we are here supporting Janice, working alongside with her as a colleague. And at this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Janice so that she can transition you all to the video.
Okay. Well, guys, I'm going to share this video. This is a very powerful video, and this is just a clips of it. It's not all of it, but this is very powerful, and I want to just share this with you.
Hey, Janice, I don't think we can hear the sound on the video. When you press share screen, if you press the two boxes at the bottom, so the sound could play. So when you press share screen, you press those two boxes at the bottom.
Okay, let me get out of this part right here. I'm gonna exit the full screen. Okay, so you said when I do what?
Yeah, so you had to stop sharing.
Okay.
And then press share screen again. But then before you press share screen, click the two boxes at the bottom. One will say like optimize for video.
Okay, so click both of them?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is that better?
Perfect.
I strongly believe that every kid deserves love, honesty, and a chance to learn.
I grew up in Houston and went to HISD schools, and I have seen a lot of love here. I've seen people who come together during hard times. I see diversity.
We moved to Fifth Ward when I was 11. And so when I think about what's going on now with education, I realized that I had what we need today, which is support.
I love Houston because it's so prideful. I have so many different religions, cultures. It's just full of like Houston pride.
I firmly believe your zip code should not determine where you go to school or how far you get in life. But unfortunately, that's where we are today.
The thing that worries me the most about the education system here in Houston is that the children that live in the low-income, under-resourced area being left behind.
Quality schools can exist in every neighborhood and should exist in every neighborhood.
And I feel like that does hinder their education in a sense, which is why teachers are so important, because we have to fill in that gap.
Every child deserves an exceptional school that will provide them with great teaching.
So I think Houston right now is at a point where we're seeing a lot of change. The more we talk to parents in Houston in areas where they haven't been talked to historically, we're hearing that they're ready. We're seeing more parents and more students, really speaking out about what they need. But there's still a lot more work to be done. There's still a lot of people we need to talk to and voices that need to be represented.
It's not time to point fingers. It's time to find resolutions and ways of correcting the problems that are set before our boys and girls.
We want to level the playing field and give the students an opportunity to win the game off of their characteristics and their skills and not be defined by the circumstances that they're coming from.
It's a team thing. So if you build a team with your teacher, then there's no limit to what that classroom can offer your child.
Parents are such a vital part of our educational system, and they hold a lot of the work.
I'm gonna stand up. I'm gonna speak. I'm gonna be my kid's voice. I'm gonna advocate for my children. Anybody's children that doesn't have parents, I'm gonna stand up and speak out.
I think effective leadership brings togetherness.
And I know that the children are our future. And if we as adults change the way we think and what we do, we can help our children.
Every student that I run across, I feel like everyone has potential.
These are our future doctors, lawyers, news anchors, our future baristas at our local coffee shop.
Houston is growing in a dynamic way, and we need to raise our students now to be the future leaders, movers, shakers, because they're going to be leading the city, country, and nation.
They are helping society move forward in a way that's productive.
We really need everyone working together across all sectors to build a better tomorrow for our children and for our next generation.
Okay, so let me get out of this. So far, what do you think? Y'all have any questions at this time?
No, but that video was amazing.
Okay, let me get this. So we're gonna go to the next, once I figure out how to get out of this. And I thank you guys for being so patient. My mother said, I'm not worried about it. She said, everybody's trying to figure out Zoom these days. So,
I strongly believe that
So Ashton, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now I'm trying to figure out how to exit this full screen on here.
every kid deserves
So you should be able to press stop share.
love, honesty.
Just press stop share again.
Yep, there you go.
Okay. That video is so powerful, you want to play again, huh?
You already know.
So now I have to go back into share. Let's see. Are y'all seeing the video or y'all hearing?
You're not sharing at all right now, so we're good. We don't hear the video.
Oh, so you're not sharing? Okay.
I love.
Let me stop that. So are you seeing that now?
Yeah, we're seeing a video now. If you press escape, you should be able to get out of the full screen and go back to your PowerPoint.
There we go. All right. Do we have any anything? Anybody put anything in the chat?
Yes, I think certain responses about the effect of that the video had on us were put in the chat.
Okay. Jasmine, you have anything in there?
I just see that Miss Shirley said it was powerful. A lot of people saying it was great, impactful, excellent. So really good responses to the video.
Okay. So we're going to Mr. Ashton now. It's his time. And Mr. Ashton, he's going to present. He's with the Texas Metropolitan Organization of TMO. So Ashton, you're actually going to share a slide, correct?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing and
if you go down to the bottom, kind of like where that participants is, you should see a button that says security. If you press that button, and then click where it says allow participants to share screen.
You able to do it now?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so good afternoon, everybody. So again, my name is Ashton Millette, and I'm an organizer with TMO, the Metropolitan Organization. Just a little bit about our organization. We've been around for about 40 years in Houston. We're part of a larger conglomerate of networks called the IAF, the Industrial Areas Foundation. We have, sister organizations throughout Texas, from San Antonio to Austin to the Valley to El Paso. And some of the work that we do, we work with institutions. So we're institution based. So what that means, we work mainly with churches and schools. So for example, Ms. Janice said that she grew up in the Fifth, or she moved to the Fifth Ward when she was 11 years old. One of the churches that we work with in the Fifth Ward right now is called Our Mother of Mercy Catholic Church, which is a very historically Black predominant church. And also we have Dr. McCullough on the call today. We also work with her and some of her, some of her folks at her church as well, at St. Mark's Missionary Baptist Church. So we're definitely all about leadership development and really, creating and working with leaders throughout the community to really, have impact that's gonna make changes for families. And I appreciate Janice so much for inviting me to come speak a little bit about the Texas legislature. So how this came about, Janice attended one of our leaders retreats this past Sunday, and we had this same portion where we were talking about the Texas legislature, because as you know, we're in the 87th legislature now, and we're about 2 or 3 weeks into it. So some big things are gonna be happening. And I can tell you a little bit more about our organization a little bit further within this presentation, but I'll get straight to it. So basically, my goal here is to kind of show who are the big power players right now. It's going to be a little bit surface level, and of course there's questions that towards the end, and we can definitely flesh some of those out. But I'll just go ahead and start off with like a big major power player. So a lot of folks might think, the governor of Texas is like the most powerful guy in Texas, right? But in actuality, the lieutenant governor has so much power that a lot of folks, don't really realize, right? So there's the basic powers, like if the governor is sick or if he's out of state, the lieutenant governor, then maintains and becomes the governor of the state. Or if there's some kind of vacancy, the lieutenant governor will become the governor. But a big thing too is that the lieutenant governor is the president of the Senate, right? So the Senate the Texas State Legislature is bicameral. So that means it's two branches or two houses pretty much. So one is the House of Representatives and the other is the Senate. And Lieutenant Governor presides over the Senate. He's the president of the Senate. A big power play that he has is he is able to really create all of the committees, like who is going to be the chair of a committee, who's going to be the vice chair of a committee, who's going to sit on these committees. And that's important because, especially when you're thinking about education, you want to have people who feel like education is important to them to be sitting on these education committees. So for example, the lieutenant governor this year around has selected Larry Taylor to chair the Senate Education Committee. So Larry Taylor is from the Friendswood area. So he's actually in the Houston area. And then the vice chair for that committee is Eddie Lucio. And then another big committee that the lieutenant governor chose was the finance committee. So when we're talking about the budget, that's going to be something really big and talked about throughout this legislature for sure. And he selected Jane Nelson to be the chair of that committee, and Eddie Lucio again to be the vice chair. So a big thing with that too, right? The lieutenant governor gets to break any kind of ties. And then he gets a vote. He actually gets a vote as well when it's the committee of a whole. So I'll stop right there and just pause for any questions that I might have, because I knew I threw a lot of information out at folks. So any questions so far?
Yes, I do have a question. My name is Tracy Lightfoot. And the question I have is, so in regard to, that was informative and thank you for that, Ashton. So when we're looking at, you know, the kind of the chain of command and how and what roles and duties that these particular politicians play, I think about the greater peace, because we know that in education, it's a big battle with, you know, charter schools. They're becoming they're becoming big. And it's a big competition with public schooling. So when we look at Larry Taylor as the chair of education, so where does he lie with this in regard to public education? Is he an advocate, or is he more of a promoter of charter schooling?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's a phenomenal question. You know, one of the things that's important too for all of us to realize is that I know me growing up, you know, the government, Senate, the House, I grew up in Louisiana. It all seemed like super distant from me, and I felt like I wasn't really able to be a part of it. But in actuality, and that's something that TMO definitely promotes as well as we talk about like leadership development, is that, you know, us as citizens and us as institutions, when we come together, like we're really able to, you know, have a seat at the table and negotiate, right? And one of the ways that we do that is by setting up what we call research actions. So we'll actually meet with somebody like a Larry Taylor, and that same question that you just asked me, like you can ask Larry Taylor that, right? So specifically, I'm not too sure where Larry Taylor would stand in terms of like charter schools versus traditional public schools. But I will say in 2019, there was a big, you know, new school financing law that got passed called HB3, and Larry Taylor was sitting on that you know, that committee as the committee chairperson when that happened. So, and HB3 is like really complicated, especially with school financing. So there's definitely a lot of give and take in there. And, you know, I think a lot more research has to definitely go into that and see like what the impacts of that has been, especially when it comes to, you know, charter schools versus traditional public schools and like what that means for funding. So I know I didn't quite answer your question, but that's only because I don't want to necessarily speak for Larry Taylor. And it also leaves the room open for, you know, setting up a meeting with him and eventually asking him that question as well and take action. Yes, ma'am.
Awesome.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm gonna keep on chugging along. So I mentioned the Senate. So the lieutenant governor presides over the Senate, and, you know, has a lot of power within that era. But then we also have the House of Representatives for the Texas legislature. So this year, the House of Representatives selects their speaker, right? So that's the person that is going to preside over the House. And the speaker for this year, his name is Dade Phelan, and he is out of the Beaumont area. One interesting thing about Dade Phelan, he is a Republican, but he got the speakership on a 143-2 vote. So Dade Phelan is kind of known as more of like a centrist type of Republican. So a lot of folks in the you know, sphere right now that's working in the legislature are feeling relatively good about what can be moved with him because he's more of a centrist, and he has been known to he and his wife has been known to support things around like mental health and mental health within education as well. So there's definitely some good movement and negotiating that can happen with him. And again, you know, if you know folks in the Beaumont area, or if you want to set up a meeting with him and get a group of folks to set up a meeting with him, that'll be a really good way to learn more about like what his intentions are, what his goals are as well. The thing about the Speaker of the House is the Speaker of the House gets to control the calendar. So there's a lot of bills that gets filed in the state legislature, like thousands of bills. But there's only like, you know, few hundred, like 890 was like in 2019, how many bills that actually got passed. So the way that it gets kind of like trickled down is that if the Speaker of the House doesn't really like a bill, or if he feels like it's not politically, savvy for him to let a bill come to the floor, he'll just like stick it on calendar. So he gets to control when a bill is going to be heard. And if he doesn't want a bill to get heard, he'll just like stick it all the way down to the bottom of the calendar. And, everything is going to happen and then that bill just won't get heard. And the thing about the House, the Speaker of the House gets to select who's going to be on committees, like who's going to be the committee chair, the vice chair, and so on and so forth. This legislative session, they have not selected the committee members yet for the House side, but it has been selected on the Senate side. That should be coming out rather soon. And if any of y'all find out before I do, please let me know. So yeah, that's a really good analogy about the Speaker of the House being like the coach, right? So he's going to position people and place them to things that are, going to be important to him and his party. And I'll stop right there about the Texas Speaker of the House and see if there's any questions at all about that. Good. Awesome. Moving on. And then of course we have Greg Abbott. So Governor Abbott. Governor Abbott, even though he has different powers from the lieutenant governor, and we might think the lieutenant governor might be, quote unquote, one of the most powerful men in the state, he still has a role to play within the legislative process, right? So much like the president signs bills into laws, he's able to veto bills. I don't know if y'all ever heard of like Rick Perry, but there's a story about Governor Perry. They call it the Father's Day Massacre because there was like thousands of bills that got, pushed out to him, and he vetoed like almost all of them, and only like a few hundred ended up actually becoming law. So, the buck kind of does stop with the governor. So if the governor doesn't agree with what is going to happen with a bill, he can definitely veto it, or just call it pocket veto, just like never look at it again, and then it just, happens. So the governor does have a strong role to play, but throughout the actual process itself, usually the lieutenant governor and the House Speaker play like a stronger role in terms of, fleshing out the more important bills. And then this last piece, and I mentioned before that I was going to talk a little bit more about TMO. So TMO and the IAF, which is kind of like our, umbrella organization as well. We have been committed to public education for sure, and we go about it in similar ways as some of the folks we've heard from today. So we really do believe in developing leaders within the school community, right? And not only like within the school itself, but also the outward community too, because we all know, especially like all of us being involved with education. I was once a teacher that, there's a lot of things that impact kids like outside of the classroom and outside of school that they bring to class as well. So we really do believe in making sure that we develop leaders throughout the community that are going to impact the school community overall, and really figure out a way to teach parents as well to, be in conversation, to negotiate, to share ideas with their leadership, whether it be on a school level or a district level, or in this case, a statewide level as well. And then very last thing, so as I mentioned before, TMO is a part of the Industrial Areas Foundation. So we have sister organizations all across the state, and these are our agenda of issues that we'll be advocating for throughout the Texas legislature, this 87th session. So health and mental health are, important. Police reform, we have a police reform action team that's been working since the summer. Education is a big important one, especially when it comes to education funding. Workforce development as well. So the ACE fund is something that helps to fund workforce development. We have a group called Capital Idea here that gives wraparound services to folks that are looking to get higher paid jobs and free tuition as well. Of course, COVID response and immigration are all going to be important topics too. And with that, I appreciate everyone for giving me the space and time to educate a little bit about the legislative process. And I'll leave it open again for any questions, thoughts, or comments.
And do we have any questions at this time? And Ashton, I want to thank you because this is, I believe this is a very powerful piece, just to show that there's many of us that's actually in the work and are in alliance with in education and working together, and how we can just create other leaders to deal with and address so many other different issues that we have, because as we know, there are many, many issues. And so, but one person can't do it by themselves, and that's why it's so important that we do, create leaders to take the lead on particular issues that may be of concern to others as well as themselves. So again, thank you. Thank you. So the next person on the slide, let me look at the slide again and see what's next. All right, so we're gonna get into what we really want to know something about. Miss Amy Maddox, she's an attorney. She's with Sibley, Snell, and Montgomery. And she's gonna talk to us a little bit about House Bill 1842, the Texas Education Agency Intervention Law, the what, the why, and the how. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and so that Miss Amy could share her screen and talk to us about it.
So can y'all see my screen?
No, we see you.
Let's figure that out. What do I need to do? Select the application I want to share. Okay. All right. You see it now?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Like Jenna said, I'm an attorney. I'm also a parent. I've got 4 kids in public school. Quite frankly, that's how I got involved in all this education stuff, just like many parents. My kids went to an elementary school that had a lot of parent involvement, and they headed off to middle school, and that kind of wasn't the case. I became more involved in middle school and high school, and also at the district level, and some at the state level too. I went, as Ashton was talking about HB 3, I went and with a group of people and advocated for that, which was a great experience. So because I am an attorney, I just have the ability to look up these and understand some of these statutes. So House Bill 1842, what is it? Why do we have it? It's actually 6 years old. So it's been around since 2015 and was passed with broad bipartisan support, Republicans and Democrats. It was authored by Harold Dutton and Royce West, among others. Dutton is often thought to be one of the main architects. He is a Houston native, out of the 5th Ward, and a Wheatley grad. Basically, he felt like nothing had been done about schools that had had unacceptable ratings for many years. He gave an example of a school that he said was the students were doing poorly on their standardized math tests, but according to him, didn't have enough certified math teachers, and that was part of the problem. So what he said was before House Bill 1842, districts were never pressured to do anything about failing schools. The stated purpose of 1842, this is straight from the legislature, public schools that have underperformed for multiple years should have appropriate supports and interventions to improve school performance. So basically, the entire bill was designed to put focus on schools that were struggling and make districts work to improve those schools. So how did it do that? Quite frankly, it's super complicated. It amends the Texas Education Code in several places, but the gist of it is that after a campus has been identified as unacceptable for 2 consecutive years, and that's actually 2 consecutive years after 2015, because that's when the bill was passed, then the TEA, Texas Education Agency, orders the campus to submit a campus turnaround plan. So a plan, how are we going to fix this problem? If after that plan, the campus has an unacceptable rating for 3 consecutive years, then there are consequences. And so if any of you have heard about 1842 and have heard 5 years, that's where they get 5 years. 2 plus 3 equals 5. So what are the consequences? First of all, they're mandatory. And second of all, there are only 2 choices. You can either, the TEA can appoint a board of managers. So that would be a board, an appointed board that would take over the entire school district, not just the campus, and govern the entire school district instead of the elected school board, or the campus can be closed. So just a little bit about what we mean when we say unacceptable. It's far more complicated calculations and all that than goes way beyond the scope of this. But just so you know what is meant, these are the TEA accountability ratings. So the TEA rates school districts and rates every campus. It used to be campuses either met standard or improvement required. So if you've ever heard the term IR, that stands for improvement required. Now, a few years ago, the legislature decided that was too complicated, and now it's just A through F, like you would see on your kid's report card. It's mostly STAR scores, and we won't get into whether STAR scores are a good thing or a bad thing. At high school level, it's also things like college and career readiness. Used to include military. Graduation rates is still included. It also includes not just the scores, but like the raw scores and how students did, but how much the students in a school improved. So it's not just how they did, but also if they're making progress. So the overall rating is 70% either student achievement or school progress, whichever's better, and 30% closing the gaps. Closing the gaps looks at certain populations, special ed, low socioeconomic, English language learners, race, I'm sure there are more, but so that's kind of what goes into it. And then the TA gives the ratings. So I wanted to talk about 1842 in Houston ISD. And why are we talking about Houston? Because Houston became the first district to have those 1842 sanctions come into effect. And then there are implications statewide for that. So first of all, in Houston, to some extent, the bill did exactly what it was supposed to. It forced the school districts, including HISD, to focus on certain schools. In HISD, they were called superintendent schools, and certain efforts and resources were directed that way. By a couple years later, 2017-18, the number of schools that were on the IR list had decreased. If you remember, that was also the year that Hurricane Harvey hit. 17 of the hardest hit campuses in HISD were not rated that year. You'll see I bolded that on the slide because it becomes important later on. So by 1819, HISD then had 4 schools that had been what sometimes they would call IR4 schools. They've been in IR for 4+ years. So raising the possibility that 1842 sanctions were going to happen. And sure enough, in August of 2019, when the ratings came out, there was one school that still had, one of those 4 that had an unacceptable rating. There were others that had unacceptable ratings, but they weren't consecutive. And the TEA decided to appoint a board of managers in Houston ISD, which was a big deal in the news. But as you might know, it has not happened. What happened was Houston ISD sued the TEA and got a temporary injunction from a court in Austin saying that you can't take over, you can't appoint a board of managers. And that was appealed to the TEA. I mean, the TEA appealed that, to the Court of Appeals, which issued an opinion just last month. So that's still going on. It's expected that the TEA will then appeal to the Texas Supreme Court, probably sometime in February. And some of the reasons these are important, there are a lot of issues in that lawsuit, and they don't all relate to 1842. If the TEA wins on any of them, then there'll be a board of managers. If HISD wins, there won't. But what's important with regard to 1842 is really two rulings on that regard. One, the Court of Appeals said that they didn't meet the trigger of there being an unacceptable rating for 5 consecutive years because of that year that there was no rating due to Hurricane Harvey. So that's going to be important. I'm going to talk about it on the next slide. And then the other thing is that apparently that campus was never ordered to submit a campus turnaround plan. So if you remember, 2 years, campus turnaround plan, then 3 years. There was no plan, so the Court of Appeals said 1842 was not triggered. Obviously, the effect of that is likely going to be that when next time this happens, they're going to get their act together and do a turnaround plan. But what does it all mean at this point? So obviously, House Bill 1842's intention was to focus attention on the schools that had been underperforming for multiple years. And in general, it has done that. It has done that in Houston ISD. It has done that across the state. Districts have dealt with the issue differently. There have been other districts that have utilized a different statute to do a partnership for some of these schools. Again, that's sort of beyond the scope of this of these slides, but it is something that other districts have done. This lawsuit is still going on. It could be over soon, but it also could be a couple of years. So, you know, with regard to the lawsuit itself and what's going to happen in Houston, that's all kind of in limbo. But the one big unknown, and the reason that I spent so much time talking about the lawsuit in Houston, is that if the Texas Supreme Court lets stand the decision that the Hurricane Harvey waiver broke up that 5 years, well, we all know what just happened is COVID. Not a single kid in the state of Texas took the STAR test last year, and not a single school in the state of Texas got a rating last year. So if having no rating due to Hurricane Harvey in 2017 broke that 5 years, then that would inevitably mean that having no rating in 2020 due to COVID broke 5 years at any school that this 1842 applies to throughout the state of Texas. So I think that's a very interesting point. We don't know which way that will go, but potentially it could mean that all schools are starting over on that 5 year period. And of course, as I understand it, they've said that the STAR test will be administered this year, but there's still a lot of things up in the air about how and what the effect will be and what the rate, if the schools will be rated. You know, COVID is going to affect a lot. And even if it's given, how will kids do with the, you know, they did not have a normal school year. But regardless of whether HISD or the TEA wins its lawsuit, House Bill 1842 is still in effect. We may not know whether some of these schools are on year 1 or year 3 or 4, but they're still definitely still subject to House Bill 1842. And most districts are putting some sort of emphasis on these schools. And I think that it's probably an opportunity for parent involvement, work to be done to have the community help, because the focus on struggling schools certainly, that was the purpose of House Bill 1842. Some people think it's great, some people think it's terrible, but it has definitely done that. So that's sort of the basics of how it goes. I'm happy if anybody has any questions to answer them. I should probably stop.
Ms. Amy, I really don't have any questions, but I just wanted to make the statement. Actually, 1842 really is my why. Just being the president of Phyllis Wheatley Alumni Association, and Phyllis Wheatley actually being that school that triggered the law, presumptuously triggered that law. Just when I was just outdone with the parents' lack of information given to them regarding the situation. And so when I saw that, and it's my own personal belief that parents' voices should speak loud about what they want in education. The parent voice represents the best interests of their children. And the parents working collectively with the schools and the staff and the teachers, I mean, so much can be done now. And so it's unfortunate what we're dealing with now, but again, 1842 is definitely my why. It did not come about, the most interesting thing about 1842, it wasn't birthed out of 2 or 3, 4 or 5 years of failure. I mean, it had been happening for 30, 40 years where schools in low income, under-resourced areas was actually struggling, and they were not meeting the grade, and nothing was said, nothing was being said. It wasn't even being addressed. And so when I saw that, just doing my own research, just going in and say, hey, this is not just a Phyllis Wheatley problem. This is a problem going on in certain neighborhoods, certain communities that, personally, I just felt like we need to be aware of, and we need to be addressing those issues. And so that's definitely was really the fire that got started, that got me cranked up and say, hey, this does not look good. And then the schools that are struggling, majority students in the schools are Black and brown students. And that really, really brought concern as well. Because it wasn't looking good. And then on top of that, only to learn as a parent that, they build in jailhouses and prisons based on, if a kid succeeds by the 3rd grade, they know the number that they were going to build. And as a parent, that really angered me and it really disturbed me. And I'm like, well, I know other parents care as well. And so that's when I decided, hey, I'm going to strip everything about Janice off. And I'm just Janice. I am a mother first, and I'm that grandmother, and I'm gonna speak up on behalf of the children. And like Ms. Barbara said in the video, if the kids don't have a parent, I'm gonna speak on their behalf too. And so that is definitely the fire that got me going. So I really appreciate you and this information. I think it's awesome, and thank you. And only question in the chat was from Mr. Orm, and that he wanted to know what was the current status of the lawsuit in HISD, and I believe you answered that question for him also.
Yeah, it's pending. It will probably be in the Texas Supreme Court, and the Texas Supreme Court can do several things. They could just deny it pretty quickly. They're probably not going to do that because there's a separate, really boring ancillary legal issue having to do with supersedious that nobody cares about, but it's also pending before the Texas Supreme Court. It's related to this lawsuit. It's really not related to education at all, but it's going to be a reason that they're going to look at the case. The Texas Supreme Court does not have to decide every case that comes before it. So they could eventually just do nothing, or they could take it and hear it. But I don't think it's going to happen personally. I think it will be at the earliest sometime next school year. That's just my guess.
Okay. Wow. Anybody have any questions? Anything that you all want to discuss at this time? Mr. Baptiste, you raising your hand?
Yes, I have a question. These public schools in Texas receive federal funding for, lots of categories of things. Could it be possible, or is it possible for this to be the 1842, even though it's a Texas law, could it possibly be appealed past the Texas Supreme Court to possibly the Supreme Court?
So, unlikely, and not really on the issues that you were thinking. The HISD did raise some issues relating in general to taking over an elected board, sort of voting rights sort of things. The teachers union has also filed a separate lawsuit that doesn't, as far as I know, it's not really going anywhere, but they have addressed some of that too. Because obviously, you've got to have a federal hook to get into federal court. But it really is more based on those sort of things, not on the federal funding that is received by the schools. And so if it did, then it would probably not have a lot to do with 1842. It would probably have to do with some of the broader aspects of the case and the ability to take over an elected board and how they've done that. And I also think it would go to the U.S. Supreme Court from a Texas Supreme Court. That's how it would go. And I think it's pretty unlikely. The union's suit is in federal court. As far as I know, it is still in federal district court in Austin.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else have any questions? It is Q&A time. All right, Miss Amy, are you stop sharing your screen?
Janice, I had a question.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to know, besides you ladies and you gentlemen here that are keeping the community informed, how can we track this House bill on its face and its progress in the community? How can we track this a little better?
One thing I was going to say when Janice was talking is that although House Bill 1842, I think did, this is my editorializing right now. But although it did focus attention on schools that had been struggling for a long time, arguably, at least in Houston, which is where I'm more familiar with it, they probably didn't get that focus going and get community involvement and get the word out and communicate as quickly as they should have. It's very district specific. So, one district may have schools that fall under this and others may not. Most urban districts, I think, do. So it is difficult. The TEA ratings do come out. That's pretty widely.
And I think, Amy, to answer Mr. Paul's question, I believe that is where he would actually start any of us. I mean, just going to TEA website and where they actually have it. It is public information where we can actually go to their website and we can see the schools, see their performance ratings. It's there. And so
if you just Google TEA accountability ratings, you can find it.
Yeah, it's there. And again, that's how I got so caught up in it when I went to TEA's website and I saw that. Ms. Lightfoot?
I think I just wanted to offer that, and this is, I guess I am editorializing a little bit myself here, is that there are some limitations with 1842. And I think that the purpose of that bill was to provide the support to schools like Wheatley that need it because the community and the learners, the need is there. And it seems to focus on putting out the fire once it's already in flames, rather than the schools in certain areas need continual support. So they may not be in IR at that time, but they'll always need a little bit more than just Title I funds, because the nature of those schools are hard to staff, high turnover. You have different components, maybe low parent participation in the school, and it needs ongoing support to keep it out of IR and to allow the school to be able to thrive with some supports, going forward.
And there were a lot of schools, and so the suggestion to go look on the TEA website, the ratings are good. But there are a lot of schools that are not in danger of being, in IR for 5 years, but they hover. They go in and out, and they don't get very far above, and then they go back down, and that is a tough situation. So while, for instance, in Houston ISD, ultimately it was only one school that triggered it, there are a lot of schools in that position. It just, that's the way it fell.
And someone just texted me talking about, wow, Janice, you're very passionate about this. Yes, I am. Because when I saw it, and I was just like in disbelief, and I had to own up to what I had did as a parent. I raised 3 daughters, and I was not actively involved in their schools during their elementary year, after their elementary years. By high school, by middle school, I was like let go of their hands a little bit more, but by high school, I just wasn't there as much. And I was like, wow. And so that's why when I heard student outcome don't change, so adult behavior change, and that it starts with me. So I couldn't point the finger at nobody, but what can I do? What is it about myself that I can add to this group, this work that has been going on for so long? Many, this is not nothing new. This is many people, many organizations have been working, trying to, help fix the problems, identify the problems and stuff like that. And, but when I got into those spaces and I just heard the absence of the parents' perspective, I just felt like that was more important, and that we needed to get more parents to just, hear and know what's going on and see how we can support our schools and how we can support the parents, because there are so many different issues that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
Hey,
recognize another attorney. Let me recognize you, Miss Stacy Childs. She's also an attorney here, and she was going to speak a little bit to us about this.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you for inviting me, Ms. Thomas. Attorney Maddox, you've done a fantastic job with presenting House Bill 1842. I just want to say that. But to the young lady's point about this being reactionary as opposed to being preventive, I think as schools, we need to do a better job of just making the environment conducive for parents. Before I was an attorney, I used to be a 5th grade teacher, and I used to always invite the parents into the school so they can see exactly what the kids were learning, so they can know what TEKS or what objectives we were covering. And it seemed foreign to a lot of the parents. Like, you really want me to come in the classroom and sit in with my child? Is my child doing something wrong? Are they in trouble? And I'm like, no, just come in so you can be an active participant in your child's education. And I think if we can just make the environment just better for parents, not just in elementary school when they're cute and they're small, but throughout their trajectory, K through 12, I think it would be a lot better. We won't need a House Bill 1842, because we can teach things from 7 to 3 or from 8 to 4, but if it's not happening when they go home, if it's not constantly reinforced, I think we'll end up here. So that's just something that I saw over and over again. It's not the parents' fault. It's not the teacher's fault necessarily. It's everybody has a hand in parental involvement not being as high as it could be. So that's just one thing I noticed.
I agree with Attorney Childs, and I think the purpose of this group, bringing together all the different community groups, is for us to do just that, to make sure that we have an environment where parents and students and teachers feel comfortable to make the changes that we need. I think one of the first steps could be, since we have so many positive groups who are working toward the same end here, I wonder if, Ms. Thomas, and thank you for pulling this together, if there's a way that you guys could provide us a document of who the different groups are, how you can work together, what's different, so we know which group to go to for what specific kinds of things. And I can see an interest and a benefit, and every now and then this group coming together, so we as those who are concerned about the community can see what's being done, what's the easiest way to get to one point, and so we're not duplicating services.
Awesome, awesome. I would definitely look into that and see how I am in relationship with quite a few groups. And as we have our topics every month, I'll be inviting different people to those spaces, and that'll be definitely a way to connect. And the reason why I'm asking them to come to these spaces is to talk to us, the parents. We want to know, we want to be involved, and we want to be more engaged. But we do realize that there's a lot that we do not know about the educational system. So we're open to, learning that information from you guys, especially those who have been there, been in the works for such a long time. As a parent, I don't want to come in like I'm the only one with the answers. I know other people have the answers. Other people have did what I'm wanting to do or trying to do. And so why reinvent the wheel and just, join the team that's already doing the work. And that's pretty much where my heart is with that.
Yeah. And
can I add one? Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say one quick thing. I think the thing that changed my mind about this educational system was that parents are the ones with the information. I mean, we may go to school and we may learn how to teach, but the parents are the ones that have the information about the children. And if we refocus our attention on parents having the knowledge necessary for us to educate their children in a better way, I think they will feel more empowered knowing that information. So that's all I was going to say.
All right. Thank you.
I was going to just say quickly that I think it was Ms. Lightfoot that brought up the resources needed for all these schools. And Ashton is the one who was talking about House Bill 3. And, parents can advocate on every level at your campus, at your kids' school, all the way up to the state. And obviously with COVID going on, it's a rough budget year, but there have been some promising statements that the legislatures do not want to cut and they want to keep House Bill 3. And a lot of what was in House Bill 3 was resources towards certain populations and to really try to direct the money where it's most needed. And another big thing that you should hear is something called Hold Harmless. And I'm going to make a plug for that. And what that means is we fund our schools based on who's going to the schools. We have a lot of kids, and particularly a lot of pre-K kindergarten kids not in school right now, because if their option is to sit on a computer, that doesn't work really well for a 4-year-old. And so a lot of people haven't sent their kids to school, and we know how important pre-K is, and it was a big part of House Bill 3. So there are a lot of groups that maybe Janice could include that just send out information as the legislative session gets underway. Obviously, Ashton is a very good resource on that, it sounds like, and ways to really make sure that the gains we got 2 years ago are not lost just due to COVID circumstances. So that's my plug for that.
Okay, can you stop sharing your screen, Ms.
Yes.
Maddox? Okay. Parents, do we have any other questions, or do anyone else have any questions, any additional questions, comment? Are there any issues that anybody want to bring forth at this time, you're welcome to speak out or put it in the chat. We really would appreciate that.
I'd like to, and I don't know if this is quite, I mean, I think it's the appropriate time to bring this up, and it has a lot to do with accountability and accountability is great. It's a great word. It's a great term, but it means so many different things to so many people. And when I was in high school, for instance, we were the first to test, I believe, Mr. Orton, you can check me on that. You were my principal at that time. We were tested we were the first group to test under this accountability, and many students did not do well that year. What did we do before then? Becomes my question, because what I have seen since graduating high school is many communities around the Houston area, for instance, that once they get a school labeled, perhaps a high school or a middle school labeled, house values go down, they decrease in value. Those neighborhoods start to really suffer, and it seems to just prolong the problem. Now, I'm a graduate a proud graduate of the Houston Independent School District, but I've also attended LA Unified, and I've attended Aldine ISD, as well as school in Austin, Texas. And what I'm seeing across the country, and I've done work in different states, is once a school is labeled and once we start labeling schools, it seems to damage rather than improve those neighborhoods. And I've been in education for quite some time. What did we do? And this is to some degree a rhetorical question before accountability. Why were schools considered good before accountability? And I think we really need to take a look at that question. I think we need to ask ourselves that hard question on what really matters to us. Is it at the end of the day, right? I mean, if you can find out what a student learns without giving them a test, you will win the Nobel Peace Prize, right? So there is some testing and accountability, that needs to happen to a certain degree, but to what degree? And in terms of how do we moderate that? And I honestly believe, and I'm gonna throw it out there, that we need to go back to what really matters. What are we really trying to do for children? We want them to be good, productive citizens at the end of the day. We want them to get into good colleges. We want them to get great jobs. So why aren't we measuring that instead of putting so much emphasis on what they learn while they are in a K-12 environment? That's great. Again, there were days when teachers just literally cared about us and cared about our learning, and they weren't necessarily worried about looking at us as a test score and writing us up if we threw away too much trash. I mean, this is what's happening. I've been a classroom teacher. I've been a consultant for schools. And I really feel like we need to think about schooling differently in terms of every student being some type of test score when they walk into the building.
And Mr. Baptiste is a parent. All caps. He is definitely a parent as well. Those are great points that I believe he made in that. Mr. Orr?
Well, let me say there's several answers actually. To one of the questions, what do we do beforehand? I think one of the answers to that is that people basically did not care about specific schools. One of the reasons that this House bill came into effect, how are you accountable for all the schools? At one point in time, the rating system was based upon how well do you perform overall, which meant if you had high performing students, your school looked good, your district could look good. So here again, we try to look at how do we gauge an effort to make sure that all students in all schools are doing well. And Seth, I think your point is a very good one. It's been a national conversation for a long time. And there's a lot of interest actually in how do you gauge and look at students based upon how they perform with different projects, different internships. So there are several ways to look at how students are performing. Some students perform better, whether it's a verbal and nonverbal issue. Some students perform better because of biases, whether it's a gender bias or a racial bias. So there are lots of questions and there are lots of answers. Unfortunately, what happens so many times is that the leadership of these educational groups actually set a policy that everybody must follow. And we haven't taken the time to really study what we know works. And I believe that all of the answers in education are things that we know. We just don't apply it. If you look at a child who is the young prince of the Queen of England, those students, those children are valued because we know they're going to be someone special. So we take the time, we take the patience to ensure that we're doing the right things for them. So the easy answer is, if we truly cared about all students, we would take the time, we would take the patience to make sure, because they're going to inherit the future, that we take care of them. And I believe that each school community can look at what's important in that community that will affect the learning of those schools, and then we create an assessment based on how we need to move those students. So I think your questions are good. I think the answers are all there. We just revisit those too many times.
May I make a statement to answer the question, what happened before? Let me take you back in history, and I'm just going to make a few statements and be quiet. If you remember Ross Perot, when he was in the legislature, that's when we first came out with no pass, no play. And when you begin to look at Ross Perot and the legislation and the influence that no pass, no play had on education, that began to put the test in place called the TEAMS test. And then when you left the TEAMS test, then you had the TOTS test. Then after the TOTS test, then you began to look at the STAR test as it relates now. So when you go back and look at the historical perspective of the people who were in politics and why no play, no pass, no play was very important, that was because they didn't want a lot of the minority schools to be able to continue to win and do take over the trophies and stuff that was being won statewide. And when you look at Ross Perot, no pass, no play, then you look at the teams, then you go to TAS, and then you go to STAR. That kind of answers your question, Seth. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. This is some great conversation. We're
something.
Sure.
Hello. So yes, I do agree with. I think that is that you, Dr. Yarbrough?
Dr. McCullough.
Dr. McCullough, I'm sorry. And so yes, that is the truth. I'm a product of North Forest Independent School District. And so that was one of the things that we faced my year of 96, was that we were actually, North Forest was in a very low performance area of doing the actual task test. And I went to Forest Brook. We actually passed the test, and because we all passed the test, they actually made us retake the test again because they thought that we cheated. And so the second time around for us taking that test again was because they wanted to make sure that we didn't have assistance. They literally took our teachers off campus and brought in a whole entire team for us to take the test. We took it in the gymnasium, and that's how they tested us out. And actually we did better the second time than we did the first time. Another thing is that I'm also a community activist towards making sure that the children in the inner city community here in Northeast Houston, they are actually given the same opportunities to be able to perform well in school. So one of the things that I do also see often is that the lack of parent participation is also because of the lack of communication between the schools and the parents. Also, another thing that has been observed is that when they're setting meetings from the district on down to the schools, they're setting these meetings when parents, majority of our parents that we're servicing, 85% of our parents are single parents and they're at work. So when they are servicing them, they're servicing them during a time frame when the parents are at work. And we have asked for different meetings to be held on a Saturday, early mornings, or some other kind of alternative time frame, but that's one of the things that we're pushing for. And so a lot of things that is being stated when we're talking about being parent driven, and I am also a parent of children who attend HISD schools, and also a school that was in ops to be closed, which was Kashmere. And one of the things that we did as parents for Kashmere was, it was a few of us, but we got together and we really did huddle around our principal And we had a meeting with the teachers and we talked with them and we asked them what it was that we could do and also what was their expectation for our children so that we could start implementing these things at home. And we also brought to the forefront of ideas to letting them know these kids are faced with so many responsibilities beyond the fact of just being able to get up like any other child and go to school. No, some of these kids are parenting their brothers and sisters. Some of these kids are working. Some of them are parenting their own children. So meeting their expectations and their needs at the way that they are learning. And so those are just some of the things that we did to make sure that we were involved. And also, of course, we did schedule a meeting with TEA, and we did make sure that our voice was concerned. And that's some of the things that we have to do. We really seriously have to go back to bringing forth our community and really seriously going to TEA and saying, we thank you, we understand, but these are some things that we're looking forward to happening. So that's just my thoughts.
Ms. Nikki, I really appreciate your thought, and I'm looking forward to even working with you more as we, do what we need to do as parents. And you brought forth some tremendous points, which are real. This is real. What she was saying about what we deal with as parents. I mean, my daughters, both of them are been classified as essential workers, and I have the grandbabies because they're not comfortable with sending them back to school right now. But we do have to push forward and work together and address those issues that we are dealing with in our own neighborhoods, so that we can bring it to the attention of whether it's TA, but let's hit the board first. Let's hit our trustees first. Let's hit those school board meetings first. Let's do that as well. We have not passed our time, just last 2 minutes, but I just want to make an announcement of our next meeting, which will be, let's see, I'm gonna do it again, which is going to be, can you all see the screen? Can everyone see the screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so our next meeting we're planning is gonna be on February 9th. We're gonna offer 2 sessions, 12 and 1:30, and then session 2, 6 to 7:30. It's on education finances, state and local taxpayers' commitment to education. So we're looking forward to bringing that back, bringing that out, and having discussions around that. I really appreciate Ms. Childs and Ms. Maddox in this space. They have been really awesome. So those of you who had signed up, and I have your email address, I will share out information with you guys on when our next meeting is. If you know of anyone who would like to join us this evening, we're going to have the same platform again, where we have this discussion with everyone that's here today. We're going to bring that back to you again at 6 o'clock today. Again, if there's no questions, guys, I really do thank you. I appreciate this. You just don't know, your presence show your support of the children, the support of the work that's being done. And then, I mean, it just shows that you really do have a true interest in this. And we just got to find our space or whatever, strike your fire. I already told y'all what lit me. So whatever it is that lights you up, and let's get to work. And thank you guys. And I hope to see you all on February 9th.
Thank you, Janice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janice, for the opportunity.
Thank you.